Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Monday, the 4th day of September, 2017. I trust that everyone had an enjoyable weekend, incident-free weekend as well, even though we know that that is not the case. And we'll talk about a few incidents that apparently took place over the weekend as well. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension of that, For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether you're working in an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open, and there is always someone there waiting to take your calls. Normally, it's that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then email us at For the Record, one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. And it is normal for me to have in the studio with me my co-hosts, Dr. Steve Macfield and Miss Theresa Pitcairn. Miss Theresa is on her way in. She will be, with us this morning as well. But without any further ado, I'd like to say good morning to Dr. Steve Macfield and welcome again. And I trust that you had a great weekend, sir.
Good morning to you, Mr. For the Record. Yes, and good morning to all your listeners locally and those that are listening to you abroad. Yes, I had a good weekend. It was very productive for me. I did a lot of reading on this weekend. And I look at some old records. And, of course, I visited some friends. I think you were there. Some Caymanians got together to talk about their ancestries and their history and their culture, and that was very enlightening for me. I enjoy things like that, and I think you should have them more often with more people involved.
Yep, I learned so much just on Saturday night, and Nikki Godfrey and Niels Godfrey. Now, I think they're 2 years apart. Nikki's 2 years older than Niels, but Nikki knows so much, and his recall, the memory.
Yes.
People would ask, "What about this person?" And he would not only know the first name, but he would know the last name.
Yes.
He knew exactly where they lived, where they came from. He's another individual that we really, really need to tap into, because that knowledge, we do not want him to take that with him. We have to retain that. But I learned so much on Saturday night. It is unbelievable.
Yeah, he on Saturday night there were a lot of gray areas and a lot of places in my memory that I didn't, because you see I've been off the island for such a long time at one time, and he sort of brought them back to me and put me in a position where I could recall and understand who was this person's parents and grandparents and what were the family trees. And even he could tell me how people came on the islands and their connections with Honduras or with Jamaica or with other places that they came from. And I didn't know where some people, families, grandparents and great grandparents came from, and he was able to enlighten me about that, and I was so enthused about it. So that prompted me all weekend to go back and start reading and to look at some of the genealogy and history of the Caymanian families.
Yep, and don't forget now that we also have that question about Crew Road. Where did Crew Road
Yes.
get its name? And if
Yes.
anyone listening knows, we certainly would love for them to share that with us. But you say that you think that you have that information.
I have that
somewhere.
information
Yeah.
in my record somewhere. I was not able to get to that this weekend because I have different files for everything, and but it's in my record about how Crew Road got its name. But what I do know off the top of my head is that Crew Road was partly built by Mr. Bonner Russell and Mr. Thompson. I can't remember his last name. The Thompson had the old gas station out.
Mr. Tyler Thompson. I think
yes.
they said his name was. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that built the town, and in fact, there was a swamp that they couldn't fill, and Mr. Bonner Russell built a bridge over the swamp to get from one part of the road to the other, and that lasted a long time until when they got modern equipment, and when they had to start the regular public works, because in those days what they did, they had marl diggers digging marls from a marl pit, and then shoveling it on a cart or something to the site, and using marl beaters to beat the marl down. And I think that it must have been in the 1930s or 40s or 30s or 40s when they actually finished Crew Road. But I understand it was Mr. Thompson and Mr. Russell that built Crew Road, two of them together.
Yeah. Well, I want to say good morning to Miss Teresa, and here I am. I'm looking at your message on the phone and saying I'm at the front door. I'm speaking to Lenford and telling him, and you were actually in the studio in front of me, but I missed it altogether. Again, my peripheral vision because of glaucoma. Sometimes I don't see as much as But welcome, and how was your weekend, Miss Teresa?
Hi, morning, Steve. Morning, OC. Morning to our listening audience, wherever you are, whether it's in Cayman or somewhere on this glorious part of the world. I am good. Had a good weekend. Oh, by the way, before I even traverse into any discussion this morning, I had a number of calls at the weekend. When I referred to Al at the show on Friday, there was some misinterpretation as to whether or not I was referring to Al Saku or Al the Premier.
Yes.
Now, I referred to Al the Premier in the context of relationship, going to school and, colleagues and so on, not being disrespectful to the office at all. And I know that he understands that as well. And as I prefaced what I said that no one goes into office with any intention whatsoever to destroy the Cayman Islands or to destroy our people. But we in the show, try to raise the issue, and for the most part, I think we try to do it in a respectful and impartial way. And I was referring to Alva Saku, the politician. I wasn't suggesting he only had one term left to run.
That, yes,
yeah. I was saying that our premier said that this was his last, this was his sojourn. He's not his swan song, and he wanted to leave, I believe, with a fairly good legacy. So what I was saying was that LA needs an island of stability with all those concerned. In that, when we go to the polls, we don't elect people to go into office for their own personal agenda. And any good idea is a good idea no matter who it comes from, as long as it's in the best interest of the people. So I just wanted to clarify that and to ensure that we're all on the same page. And having said that, I'm wishing everyone a blessed and wonderful and memorable week.
Thank you very much for that. I again want to extend condolences to any families who may have lost family members during the weekend. I want to mention one in particular that I'm aware of now, Mr. Dave Smith and Miss Lynn Smith, and I know that they are regular followers of the show, or for Show for the Record, and unfortunately they lost a son over the weekend as well on Saturday. So want to extend our condolences to that particular family this weekend. Also saw that we had, actually, when we were leaving our meeting on Saturday night, Dr. Macfield, we got messages in about a robbery in the Scranton area. I think it was first reported that someone had gotten shot.
Yes.
And then that was changed to say that they may have been hit over the head with a blunt object, and that shots had been fired in the area as well. So, and I believe the eventual police report indicated that the description of the perpetrators in that particular instance was given, and then later on there was a robbery at the jerk stand in the Red Bay area near the Red Bay Primary School, and again the description of the perpetrators there seemed to be quite similar to the one given for the incident in the Scranton area as well, and whether or not there's any connection, that hasn't been established yet. But, you know, as a layperson, just looking at the information that was given out by the police, it seems as if maybe the same person. And again, I always, my rhetorical remark to that is, who's out of prison now? Who's out now? You know, when you see things starting again and you see the modus operandi being, you know, very similar, you know, who's out of prison now, or who took off their ankle bracelet that they had on there for them and aren't being tracked by the authorities.
And on the other hand, you have to ask the rhetorical question too: which canoe has come in that had let off people that can't get back right away now and need money and in some safe place someplace, because that is a problem we have with unsecured borders. And if we had unsecured borders, I could support you 100% on that. But since we do not have unsecured borders, you have to say that we have to wonder whether or not somebody is coming in and doing these crimes, because we know we have this already. We've had that example already where people come in and they're doing a lot of robberies, and some of them are caught, some of them are not caught. And of course, you know, we had one of the most wanted people from Jamaica, and last month I think it was, that was caught in Cayman Islands, and that disturbs me a lot. I know that the police can be everywhere, but you know, there should be some really, really strong undercover work, because I remember in the 1970s and 80s when Mr. Jim Borden was the de facto leader of the country, he had brought in some people here when the drug trade had started to escalate and it started to increase. He had brought in some people here, and they gave him a report from every district. And at that time, I knew every drug dealer and every drug user in the district, and he brought it in clandestinely. I think he and 4 other people through a society called the Help Society. You know, and I don't know why is it now that we have all these modern equipment. I understand one time the police said to me one time, I think it was, I can't remember if the police officer said they had a secret weapon. If you remember that, they had a secret weapon. I don't know what it was, but it was
still secret.
Yeah, it's still secret. It's still secret because it's still secret. So you know, we demand to be more protected. It's getting out of hand now, and if protection doesn't come from the state, I'm afraid that I hear people say now they're going to have to do it themselves to protect themselves, and that's not a good thing when you have vigilante justice.
Okay, we're going to go to a commercial break. We have one caller. We're going to ask that caller to hold on there for a few minutes while we take a commercial break. When we return, we will go directly to that caller. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Theresa Pitcairn. We have one caller going to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Osby.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning, Ms. Theresa, and good morning, Dr. Steve Macfield.
Good morning, ma'am.
This is Georgia D. Banks. I always say my name.
Yes, ma'am.
And I trust that all 3 of you and all your family members are well. so far as I just told Miss Susan a few minutes ago, I'm doing quite well for an old lady, and my family members are keeping quite well.
That's good to hear, man.
Thank God. He's an awesome God, a wonderful God. Now, I have two statements to make. One pertains to Miss Teresa and one to Dr. Maxfield. And please do not commit. I guess most people know that.
Yeah, we know that now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then. Miss Teresa, I had no idea, sweetheart, that you had gone through all that you described at the museum when you were Miss Cayman. Oh, as a Cayman woman, I am so very sorry about that. Anyway, sweetheart, you are all the better for it. A stronger, most wonderful woman. I know you're very good friends with my oldest daughter, Anita, and I'm sure she's very proud of you too.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
now the question or the statement goes to Dr. Maxfield. I know, Dr. Maxfield, that all the land in Cayman, you emphasize that about a week on the radio, that it's really crown land. It belongs to, in a sense, England, the mother country. But this is what I want to find out, and you will answer me, and I'll listen most intently. I have known our Premier, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin, since he was a little boy. I admire him. I love him. I knew all his family. His mother was my good friend. His father and I think his father's 1 year older than I am. We met just a few weeks ago at the hospital. I'm going to be a little longer than usual. And I know his sisters too. And I would not want his legacy to be that he and the present government were the ones who sold off any of our land and those last 3 little beaches that we have. I want Honorable Alden, our Premier, to go down in history as loving his people. I believe he loves his people. No one is perfect. He's not perfect. I'm not saying he's perfect. None of the people that are in the LA with him are perfect either. I am definitely not perfect, but God is working on me though. And I hope and pray that not one single more piece of our land will be sold, and definitely we have no more beaches to lose. We have already lost the 7 Mile Beach, because most of my friends, and I too, call that the concrete jungle. As an old Cayman woman, I'm so glad to say when I was young, and even my 3 daughters, and even I think my grandchildren had a little taste of a little bit of what it used to be like. But it's definitely not the 7 Mile Beach any longer. So I thank you, Mr. O.C., for letting me run up my mouth this long, but I just felt I needed to say those things and to hear whatever answers you 3 people will give, especially Dr. Steve. Thank you. Just to say those things and to hear whatever answers.
Thank you very much, Miss Georgette, for that. You know, we have a lot of time for you, Miss Georgette. We always make sure that we give you your space and your time to express your views. And you can certainly do that in a clear and concise fashion, and we certainly appreciate that, Dr. Hartfield.
Well, Miss Georgette, what I said was all the crown lands in the country belongs to the Queen. Not all the lands in the Cayman Islands, because in the Cayman Islands we have freeholds, a freehold system, and therefore once it's a freehold and you have title for it, the title belongs to you. And if the crown wants it, they have to pay for it. If they wants to buy your land for roads or for any public purposes, they want to acquire it, they would have to pay the market price. But all crown lands belongs to Her Majesty the Queen. And I understand what you said about the use of the land, and it seems to me, Miss Georgia, that the lands that we have, like the crown lands that the government is the custodians of, if they want to put to use, they could go into a public-private partnership with Caymanians to set up small hotels, small boutique hotels where they could use that land to benefit Caymanians, because it seems to me that Caymanians are now 12th class in their own country, and that would be a good thing if the government could use those lands and go into a public-private partnership with Caymanians who have the means to help them to set up little boutique hotels and stuff on those pieces of properties that are in the tourist area, so that they can make money and can benefit themselves, and the government would not have to be spending $50 million a year on welfare, keeping Caymanians to feed Caymanians who at one time could feed themselves and was economically stable.
Okay, very good point. Thanks for that. We're going to switch gears for a minute, because on Friday I wanted to mention it, but time didn't allow. The situation in Kenya, I don't know if you all have been following it, but we saw where the High Court in Kenya has annulled the election results there, and they have to have another election within a period,
within
60
days.
60 days.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting about that was that you had observers, you had EU observers, there were American observers, I believe, as well.
And British observers.
UN observers also. And they all claimed that the elections were free and fair, but the court found otherwise. Which brings us, and I'm a strong advocate for the whole concept of election observers. I'm a strong advocate for that. But it goes to show you that if they're not underground long enough, and if they don't immerse themselves into the whole process, and sometimes even by doing that, you're still not able to pick up all of the nuances and all of the things that may go on during an election. Yet the local people will know more about it than anyone else. Hence, to me, sometimes the local observers, is good to have them as well, as long as you can find those that are political and neutral, who can expose and bring out some of the corrupt practices that do go on there. But this particular decision by the courts in Kenya is an indictment on the whole observer process as well. We have to go to the news now, but bear that in mind. And then when we come back, we want to look at this report about the police service, especially the family support unit, and we want to talk about that as well, because what I'd like to reinforce on that again as well is having the right expertise in the right place, and sometimes whether or not those right, quote unquote, right persons need to necessarily be police officers, but more to know more about the system and anything else. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after our 8 o'clock news. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McFeel. Before we went to the news, we mentioned what we wanted to continue to talk about when we returned. We wanted to talk about the elections in Kenya, the nullification of the results there, and we also want to talk about the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, the verdict that was given by the inspection team that came down to look at the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service and the family support unit as well, to do a review of that. In the Kenya situation, Dr. McFeel and Ms. Theresa, I see where the president, current president, the incumbent in Kenya, says that something is wrong and it needs to be fixed. But what he's talking about is the courts, because he's claiming that the courts are corrupt. Now, this is really unprecedented in African politics in terms of having a court overturn a decision. Normally, you find the courts siding with the ruling party, but in this particular case, it has been different. Now, people are worried that, or some persons are worried that a situation could occur in terms of violence that occurred in 2007 after the results of those elections, as well. The other issue is that the opposition leader, Odinga, says that before they go to elections there, that they need to change the Electoral Commission because they were the ones who announced the election results. They were the ones who gave Kenyatta the $1.4 million vote majority there, and you cannot conduct an election using the same Electoral Commission that is being accused of falsifying information or corrupt elections to begin with.
Well, I don't understand how they are going to change the election commission, because the election commission was appointed by the president himself and his government, and that's one of the problems that they have, because the court says that there has to be an election within 60 days of the judgment. And it seems to me that there's not going to be an election within 60 days unless you have a new commission. And that's something that is not going to be put in place by the government, because the government does not want to have a new commission. And even if they were forced to do so, I think it would break out into a civil war. The problem that they face now is that if they do not have an election within 60 days, the Speaker of the House will become the interim president until when an election is actually held. It seems to me that this can be a stalemate here. And what the president is talking about, Kenyatta is talking about, fix it. What he's alluding to is he wants to fire the whole court, the bench, the whole court system, and appoint new judges, and that is the thing that I think is going to tear the country apart, because if he gets reelected and he does that, it's not going to be peace in the country.
I'd only comment minor. My comment will only be a minor one in that I know he felt that the ruling was unconstitutional, even though you had a majority of 4 judges to 2 who actually conceded that what was going on with the election commissions was wrong. And as you rightly say, in the context of what transpired in 2007, where you had about 11,000 people were killed and some 600,000 Kenyans displaced. One of the comments that I read at the weekend was that Kenyatta is a Mugabe in the making, and that is pretty serious, because of course we know the kind of history that Kenya comes from, in that you had the Mama insurrection where a lot of people were killed, and so the Kenyans have had a history of actually addressing certain concerns when it comes to reforms and their rights. Yeah.
Okay. We'll switch gears again now. We'll go to the report on the FSU, and both of you being lawyers. I know, Ms. Teresa, you've done less appearance in court and dealt probably more with corporate matters in court, but I'm sure that outside of court that you've dealt with all sorts of issues, and we know Dr. Steve Macfield is more involved in the courthouse process. My take as a layperson, and I'm still fixated with this, and I need to be convinced otherwise, that the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, in addition to needing to have on staff persons who are well versed in the law and the procedures, police procedures, that you also have to have expertise on the other side of things, the social side of things as well, and that balance needs to be created. It is not often that you find a situation where you have a police officer who possesses all two attributes: a good police background, a good social background, as well. And I think in looking at their recruitment process, they need to bring officers into that. Not necessarily officers who have experience in dealing with, family issues, assault issues, sexual, child abuse issues, but also persons who, from a professional training background, the social sciences part of things, that is where they come from. I lay that out to both of you.
That was, well, I didn't think that that's where you were going to come from. But as you were speaking, I was thinking of the need to have police with soft skills. And those soft skills obviously include how you communicate with people, whether you have empathy with people, you're concerned, and you address the way in a way that it's non-confrontational. That's one thing. You speak about the expertise, legal background, and I know, for example, that the Deputy Commissioner of Police has a legal background as well. And when they have real concerns, they probably raise these with the Attorney General's chambers. I don't know if you were talking about the relationship between the police and the public and how they manage. Oh, but before I forget, I was going to comment on the comments made by the Commissioner of Police that appeared in today's paper. We always, and what we try to do is to bring some balance and some measure. And I know some of the times we can be quite rigorous. But one of the things that I want to give public kudos to was the fact that the Commissioner actually owned the mistakes that were made on behalf of the police force. He talked, and this was.
I don't think you could do otherwise when you get when you have an indictment from the judge, from a judge, as well as the consultants that you bring.
But gross incompetence
Yes.
was the term. But the thing is, it's a start. I have not known in recent history of any police commissioner coming out and saying, "Hey, look, we try to do our best. In most cases, we do a good job, but we failed in this," and that there was a corporate failure within the police force.
Systemic, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the fact that he came out and owned it, I thought that was a move in the right direction. It was courageous. It showed some integrity, and it showed a measure of decency. So perhaps that is something that we can build on. And I had to raise it this morning because I know when we had members in last week, they thought, but there were folks that thought that we were overly aggressive. I don't think necessarily that we were, but we were certainly quite rigorous with some of the things that we raised.
Well, we asked the hard questions.
Yeah, the tough, yeah, and yeah, but in terms of what you were just raising, were you talking about the relationship between the police from a humanities perspective and how they relate to members of the community? Because I'm not clear.
No, what I'm talking about is I think, you have people who work in social services and you have sociologists, psychologists. Those are the persons that they need to have employed in the police service
As
in
well.
addition to law enforcement officers.
Yeah, well, that's
it.
yeah.
Yeah, you need to have a more professional police force. I find it very disheartening when you have cases like the sexual abuse cases, and all you have is a hard police evidence that doesn't do any good whatsoever. And even today, many other police forces around the globe have these kind of people now. So some of those police forces have to have a degree in sociology or social anthropology or something like that to be able to get those jobs. And it seems to me that, this is not something new to us. This has been happening in our society. it was a cultural thing that we did not want to speak about for generations. We did not want to speak about it. The abuse of our children and so forth. And I think that was a time when people were in Cayman were had to live in close quarters, in close accommodations with each other, and that sort of living was untenable. And then in the 1970s and 80s, that sort of went away when people 18, 19 years old could go out and get their own jobs and get their own apartments and move away. And now it seems it's coming back again now again. And it seems to me that a lot of it is tied to the economic systems, where people take advantage of other people because they're not in the same economic bracket, and where people are poor and people have to live up and together and small apartment and small spaces and things like that. And it seems to me that those are the things that will destroy the whole cultural development of a country if we don't take it into hand and get the people. I have been talking to people like Dr. Lockhart, and he has a good he has given me a good synopsis of why these things happen, and I understand that what he's trying to do. And it seems to me if we do not have a better economic system where we can weed people out, where we can separate people, and culturally and socially and economically, that this is going to continue, and that you're going to have this sort of stigma. And as a result of that, we're going to be spending more money to hire more people, more policemen, more police people, more court systems, and so forth.
What is I guess that I'd like to ask then, what is the professional development program? What type of professional development program that we have with our police? I know that we have, for example, it's currently structured in different organizations. You'll have the financial crime unit, and you'll have, so do we have other units that have these specific skills that assist the police?
I don't know. I know you have. I know what they have. The anti-corruption unit that is split off now from the police, and that is a separate thing. It seems to me that there has to be some concerted educational effort, a higher standard of education in the police force, and we have to admit that is necessary, and it has to be not only a training in a police office, but it has to be at a professional institution like a university or a college.
Mm-hmm. It seems as if this report has to do with the effective managing the police's investigations into child abuse and crimes taking place within a family setting. Those seem to be the main areas of concern, and those issues that can have profound impact on people's lives, families,
That's right.
young children. Goes to show you the urgency which needs to be put into resolving these issues, getting them through the courts, while at the same time seeking whatever professional help the victims of those crimes need to have in the meantime. You cannot wait until a case has been concluded before you go and you start to seek assistance for the victims. That is where, to me, you need a closer working relationship between the family support unit and all of the government agencies, or even civil society that deal with these issues. Like you have one of the units that deals with abused women, seek to house them and everything else. Those that deal with young children. You need to have that collaboration, and I'm not seeing where that is taking place. I'm seeing, in these articles and stuff like that, that the problem is within the family support unit. I haven't seen anything that talks about what happens outside the family support unit, and what that is the family support unit in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. What happens outside of that, and how do they interact with other government agencies? Not only in prosecuting a case, but seeking the assistance that is needed.
Well, I haven't seen the report. I mean, when I read the article this morning, I tried to see if I could have access to the report. And you're right, it spoke about the 3 in particular child abuse cases that kind of like fell through the crack. And the concern that I had at the very beginning when I looked at it, well, what happens here? The article suggested that the police is just simply going to move on. Maybe that's what was said by way of a summary, but not really telling us if there were things that they were trying to do to make up. Not that it's something that you can make up for, but something that. But maybe we should have a conversation about all of this, because we don't know if it's about money. We don't know if there is an issue with communications between the various different government organizations. But perhaps having this type of conversation will help to bring a more aligned approach to how they deal with this. I don't know.
Okay, let's take a commercial break. For the record, we'll be back immediately after we take this commercial break. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My 2 co-hosts with me, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield as well. I just want to read one of the comments that was posted on Cayman News Service website after the comments on the article written by them. It says, "Don't blame the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service for this. They haven't got the required experience. You all need to blame your government that point blank refused the funding for an experienced person or persons from the UK to be placed in a permanent post and not just to lead the Child Protection Service for a few months and investigate previous or current child abuse. You need this experienced person to lead the child protection team in the right direction. It's no good having people from the UK to advise the team and them not adhering to their instruction." I'm not sure how you can blame the government if the government says that we have given the police the funding that they have requested, and it is then left to the police to determine where those funds will go. We haven't heard the police commissioner retort and say we just simply don't have the funds to do it. He hasn't said that, so I can't agree with this particular comment that you would blame the government in this particular instance.
But we need to drill. It's not. They always blame the government. It's a reactionary comment and a reactionary solution. What we need to do, we need to know how these things are happening and why they are happening. We need to drill down into these things, and we need to have someone who understands the cultural nuances of the country, and so to catch these things before they actually come to the place where they have to get police involved. That's what we need. We need that sort of. We need that sort of information about our country and about our people. And it seems to me when the economic situation gets to the point where people now are in dire straits, these are some of the results of a deprived economic system, and this is how people react. It's the same. They like one time, an old man told me, says, I asked him, why you sell alcohol? He said, well, when people are happy, they go and drink, and when they're depressed, they go and drink. So that's the reason why I sell alcohol, because I get them coming and going. So it seems to me that we have to get a handle on why these things are happening in our society and why they continue to happen.
Now, we have promoted and created a lot of institutions in the Cayman Islands. Our Constitution lays out many of them that support democracy. Mm-hmm. What I find that is missing in the Cayman Islands are those advocacy institutions that are needed to advocate for the homeless, the more vulnerable in our society, our children. We need a children's advocate. We have the legislation in place, but you don't have the organizations that are there that are specifically for that purpose to advocate for children. And we need the private sector to come on board and to fund some of these things. We have, people who have very, very strong views about child advocacy. And I'll name one, Mrs. Deanna Lookloy,
Yes.
retired from government. But when you hear her talk, you know where her heart and her commitment is. We need to have independent institutions headed up by persons like that who have no qualms whatsoever in terms of criticizing who needs to be criticized, outing who needs to be outed when the system fails. We need to have those types of institutions. We have them, like I said, supporting democracy. We need to have them supporting the more vulnerable in our society.
And the question is then, who are the more vulnerable in our society? Where are they? In what part of the country do they live? And where are they situated? And I don't have to go to tell you where they are and where they're situated, because we know. And it seems to me that if they can have an organization to look after the elderly, and I understand they have that now, and they were calling the other day for people to volunteer to sit on these elderly commission or the board or what committees or what, and people were not going to sit. Were going. I guess I don't know if they fulfill those positions, but they need an advocacy, like you said, like Mrs. Lookloy to for children, and who can go into the homes and who can understand and who can bring us the information that we need to see why these things are happening, and also. We need education. We need good education, not only education in the schools, but we need education for the parents of these children and for the caretakers of these children. We need to get back to our roots, and the comments you made there, I think you read there about we need more money to bring someone from England. You see, that's the old story. That's the old story. The same old story again. Find the money and bring the head of the department from England, and then in 2 years he'll have the whole department will be from England, and then you'll find him on the beach, at the barbecue on the beach, and the people will be committing more crimes again, and nothing will be done.
I guess for me, I'll go back to the report that Yolanda Ford did that was organized by RAG. I think it was criminality in Cayman. I can't remember what it was called, but it dealt with...
I think it's crime and criminality.
Right.
Something
but
like that.
She touched on all of these tenets that we're raising this morning, so that we know the symptomatic issues with a lot of the poverty, which leads to a lot of other things in the community. So we're aware. In terms of advocacy, I find for the most part we are a community that tends to be influenced by a lot of money. And if we can get past that place where we look to the actual needs, and I mean I'm being very, very careful with how I'm couching my words this morning, unless it makes a lot of money, we tend to be not so enthusiastic about furthering certain issues. There's one thing. And then there's the element of fear, the fear of, being perceived in a certain way and the fear of being ostracized. That, in my mind, also contributes to us being unable at this point to develop more independent advocacy, the independent level of advocacy that we need. So I know I'm tiptoeing around this subject this morning because... There's some things that it's like with the Miss Cayman issue that Ms. Georgette raised earlier, and the whole idea of race and how that contributed to my year. I decided to deliver that particular conversation with some levity because I find that humor takes off some of the harsher realities in certain circumstances. But those are my views for what it's worth.
Okay. The Yolanda Ford report was entitled Predisposing Factors to Criminality
I know it was
in the
something,
Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
And that was 2006, June of 2006.
11 years
that
ago.
Was done. Yes, yes.
Well-
so what we're talking about here is not new.
Well, Yolanda Ford report is one of the latest. I remember a study that was organized by the late Tom Jefferson. I have a copy of that home. I think that was in the 1990s or something. That also was before the Yolanda Ford report, and that also reiterated the fact that we have to have education and training and civil and professional education in the homes, and especially among the people who are most vulnerable. But it seems to me, if this had been happening in the gated communities, if this scourge had been happening in the gated communities and among the people who have lots of money, they would have been. The problem would have been fixed long time ago. They would have found money quickly to fix it. But the problem is happening to the deprived people homes and the people who don't have any money, the people who have to sleep and live 4 and 5 in one room, and who don't have whose both parents have to be working, if there are parents at all in the homes, and things like that. And people actually who have money, who do not care about those people. They do not care about them. They have, as far as they are concerned, those people have no value.
But the converse is this, though. You don't need money to have a voice. And it's the fear that we have that prevents us from having that voice, which is why I was, like I said, tiptoeing around the subject. Whenever Caymanians decide to be courageous, to talk about these endemic issues in our community, and are willing to stand up and give it voice and ownership, I think that's when you'll start to see the changes.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break. When we return, the conversation will continue. And of course, we welcome you to join in the conversation if you so wish. We know that when you're quiet, that you're listening. That means that what we're saying is extremely important and you're absorbing it. And we will give you more of it if you just want to listen as well. Just don't change the dial. Stay right there. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn. Dr. Macfield, you mentioned legislation in relation to older persons, and I just want to make it quite clear that you weren't criticizing that legislation.
No,
you
we
just
weren't.
simply mentioned that we have it for that,
Why
but not
can't we have it
necessarily
for
for others.
children?
And I just want to mention, to add to that by saying that the older persons law was enacted in the Cayman Islands. It came into effect. It commenced on the 17th of July, 2017. Then we also have the older persons policy that was created, and that is where they were seeking volunteers to sit on that particular board that would give advice to the government as well, and that older persons policy was accepted by cabinet, and that was approved in October, on the 21st of October of this year. Last year, sorry, as well. That was approved, by cabinet, and then of course the legislation came into place, and then they were looking then for people to serve on that particular board. I'm going to switch gears again a little bit now, and because one person called offline talking about customs, talking about the whole process of importing a car, and the trials and tribulations of that. And of course, we can also talk about the pros and cons of importation of vehicles, especially the ones that we refer to as deportees. The person was mentioning the fact that when you go to customs to clear or to pay to clear whatever that you get on one line, you fill out forms, then you have to you think that everything is over and that you have to go to another line to do things. Sometimes you go to that window and there's no one there. The lack of clerical support. We know that when the new custom tariffs came into place, new fees and stuff, there were issues with that. When the new computer system was there were issues. Haven't heard much recently in relation to that, but this person seems to think that the process is still cumbersome, still onerous, and then in addition to that, you pay $3,900, $4,000 for a car from Japan, and you bring it here, and then by the time you finish paying all of the fees, those fees and stuff exceed the cost of a car. And then the other issue was the $1,200 and something that you pay for that disposal, for the eventual disposal of that vehicle, whether or not that money is placed in a segregated fund that is used specifically for the purposes of disposal or to mitigate against the effects of disposal, the environmental effects of disposal, whether or not that money is being earmarked specifically for that, or if that is just put into the government pot of money and spent for any purpose at all. I haven't imported a vehicle in years, so I'm not too familiar with the process, but I have heard more than one person talk about this particular disposal fee. Now, of course, if you bought a vehicle locally, the question is whether or not that fee is included added in, whether or not the dealer adds that into the cost of the vehicle that you purchase as well. Not sure, but we have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, O.C.
Good morning. Good morning, sir.
Morning. And good morning to Mrs. Pitcairn. It's Johan Moxham here.
Good morning.
I just wanted to pick up some of the commentary and discussion before you reach the customs and the car importation. I want to, first of all, say to Mr. McField, Dr. McField and Ms. Pitcairn, thank you for just being honest, direct, and speaking to the core issues, because you would swear that the people that run this country, that are responsible for law enforcement and the policy making of this country, would have never heard of some of these things that you guys mentioned, or they develop some form of convenient amnesia. We've been having the same conversation about this particular subject for umpteen, or it feels like umpteen commissioners. Go back to all of them. Recently, Smith, Kernahan, Baines, now Byrne, just to name the last four. What shocks me is the fact that the police, and there are some great police, there are people that work super hard and they are the model of consistency and professionalism, but telling the general public that we apologize for our failings when you have something as significant as child sexual abuse and these sort of despicable acts being committed, do they have any clue what it takes for those victims and their families to go to the police, to pour everything out in the hopes that they might find justice somewhere along the line? Now, I know people get things wrong and mistakes happen, but this is a systemic issue whereby you're talking about old cases, you're talking about new cases. Recent example, the Otto Stevens case. How in the world can the police interview potential witnesses weeks before the trial? At some point, who was asleep on the job? Were they eating donuts or in a coffee shop? What the hell were they doing? The reason why I can say that and be that passionate, because, sir, can you imagine if it was your child? Can any of you imagine if it was your child that was subjected to these things and you put your faith in law and order instead of going with your most primal thought? This is how vigilantism starts. This is, more importantly, how people lose faith in the system yet the police and everybody in the leadership role tells us the usual rhetoric of we should have faith and support the police. The police need to earn our support and earn our respect. This is worse than 60 kilos of weed and 24 kilos of coke walking out of the secure lockup. But these issues happen far too frequently with the RCIPS, but more importantly, there is zero accountability at any level. You get excuses and you get apologies. We don't want that because somebody's life is now destroyed because of the incompetence and the lack of professionalism on the job. Now, I'm going to disagree with Dr. Steve, who I have a world of respect for. The scourge of sexual predators and sexual abuse, that is a generational thing. We all know one person, two persons, multiple persons who have been subjected to these sort of things during their lifetime. I know I have, especially young women and so on and so forth. But the thing is, this isn't limited to class and money. These things happen all the time. But the greater point is, if the people and the victims are prepared to step forward and to do the right thing and not allow their family members to go into super primal primitive mode where bad things happen, you know, the police got to do better. And hiring people from the UK is not the solution. They are not the masters of all knowledge and everything wonderful. I'll use one word, tempura. We still don't know what that was about. We know it cost us plenty of money, and we know that many people were paid millions of dollars in settlement as a direct result of that train wreck. So for all of those advocates who are convinced that officers from abroad are the panacea, that's not it. How about having a comprehensive review of the RCIPS from top to bottom with the relevant audit bodies responsible for police forces in the UK? That would be a start. If we can do it for the fire service, and we can hire a friend of somebody in the fire service to do the job as the fire chief, why aren't we doing a comprehensive review of the police? It is long overdue, and what's going to happen is the wrong person is going to be aggrieved and be impacted by the lack of professionalism and the incompetence, and then you're going to have a whole other set of issues on your hands because some people aren't sensible enough to stay and show temperance and maturity and have faith in the system. Some people will just go and do what comes naturally to them, because when you mess with a child's family and with a man's family and his children, the gloves come off and you're just hoping that logic prevails. So, Madam Governor Helen Kilpatrick and your office, this is something that you are directly responsible for. To the 19 members of the LA, please stop using this as a political platform. Pretend to care about your constituents because you're getting paid a bag load of money. Do your job and demand that something sensible get done, like a thorough review of the RCIPS, so that our people can have a bit more faith in the system before we descend to anarchy and chaos. That's a request from one Caymanian. I have no skin in this game other than we pay a lot of money to the police every year. And these are the results that we get. That's unacceptable.
Thank you. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Thank you very much. And Dr. McField, when we come back from the break, we have a few callers, but I know you will want to respond to that to the extent you would probably say, I'm putting words in your mouth, you will probably say, this is exactly what I'm talking about, that our Constitution says, that if a minister, a member of cabinet now feels that they should be taking up the challenge and taking the police, Royal Cayman Islands Police Service in the right direction and getting these types of studies done and these reports and these inquiries, then ask to take responsibility for the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. Yes, people are going to hit you about crime statistics and the crime rate and stuff like that, but you also have an opportunity to shape the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service in the way that you would want it to go. So other than policy, you're also looking at the organizational structure of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service as well. Folks, please stay tuned. We have a couple of callers hanging there. We have just quick headline news. When we return, we will take your calls. And welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, and we have one caller going straight to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. How are you today?
Fine, sir. And yourself?
Great, thanks. Unfortunately, it's a terrible topic we're discussing, the lack of justice for the abuse victims.
Mm-hmm.
Not that will change their situation. But especially Dr. Macfield, I wonder if you could lend a bit of information. Isn't there the possibility of civil proceedings to help remedy some of this and take some of these perpetrators to court?
Yeah, civil proceedings are very costly. And I don't think that in civil proceedings you would get legal aid to assist you. You would have to pay lawyers, and lawyers going to court is costs a lot of money. And so you by the time you get the results that you desire, the cost would be tremendous, and you would not it would deter you from taking out civil proceeding. But civil proceedings is a way. If you can't get it the remedy down through the criminal process, the civil proceedings, but it's very, 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 very costly.
Well, I would think that with the miscarriage of justice, literally, that has taken place, that the legal department would not have a problem in assisting any victims or their families in taking that route. But anyway, it's just a thought.
Yes. Well, there should be some sort of fund for things like this. There should be some sort of fund. In fact, I was advocating for a fund like this for bringing proceedings in elections. For instance, when you challenge a person's election, it's not personal. It's for your community. You're challenging whether or not the person was duly elected. There should be some sort of fund to tap into. You shouldn't have to pay. If your challenge was refused, you shouldn't have to pay the cost of that. So,
or in the national interest, yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, sorry about this terrible topic, but I hope these people get some justice.
Yeah, so this is why we were saying we haven't seen the report,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know what is being if there's anything that's going on behind the scene to remedy these things.
And speaking to Mr. Moxham's call, I would just like, if he's still listening, to Mr. Moxham, to know that everything is not written in stone about the governor's responsibility. The Constitution clearly gives the premier the power to have the governor to assign the responsibility for the police to a minister. It says, and I will read it again, the governor, acting after consultation with the premier, may assign or delegate to any member of the cabinet by instrument in writing, and on such terms and conditions as he or she may impose, responsibility for the conduct on behalf of the governor of any business in the Legislative Assembly with respect to any of the ministers listed in any of the matters listed in subsection 1. And the matters listed in subsection 1 are internal security, including the police, and external affairs and defense. All of those matters can be taken over by ministers. If I had been elected and I had got into the cabinet, and I would urge my premier, if I was not the premier, to ask the governor to assign the responsibility to the police to me, so that I could get things done quickly and efficiently. But it seems to me that our people that we elected, either they do not understand the Constitution, they do not read it, or they have jelly knees and do not want to take responsibility for anything, but sit and get the high salary that they're getting for nothing on a part-time job.
And of course, when you talk about that, recognizing the fact that when it comes to operational procedures for the police, you couldn't direct them to prosecute this person, arrest this person, but you could help to formulate policy in terms of what from an overall standpoint, what they should be looking at.
Because policy and stuff is done under the special commission. That is something that, and it says here, on such terms and on such conditions as he or she may impose responsibility. So they could give me they could give me as Minister of National Security responsibility for the police, but I would not be responsible for the policy. I would be responsible for the policy, but I would be responsible for everything else.
Not the day-to-day
Not the day-to-day
administration
affairs of the police.
Okay. Coming back to you, Dr. Steve, in terms of our Constitution, look at our Bill of Rights. Section 17 of our Bill of Rights, Protection of Children. And it says here, in addition to the provisions of this part which afford protection to children, the legislature shall enact laws to provide every child and young person under the age of 18 referred to in this section as a child with such facilities as would aid their growth and development, and to ensure that every child has the right to A, to a name from birth, B, to family care or parental care, or to appropriate alternative care when removed from the family environment, C, to basic nutrition, shelter, basic health care services and social services, D, to be protected from maltreatment, neglect, abuse, or degradation, C, to be protected from exploitative labor practices, F, not to be required or permitted to perform work or provide services that are A, inappropriate for a child of that age, or place at risk the child's well-being, education, physical or mental health, or spiritual, moral, or social development. And I'm going to, one talks about detention, the other one says to have a legal practitioner assigned to the child by the government and at public expense in civil proceedings affecting the child if substantial injustice would result. That may tie in sort of with what Caller spoke
saying, yes.
about. And so my overall question is, has the Royal Cayman Islands Police Services, in their admission, have they breached the Bill of Rights as far as the protection of children is concerned?
Well, it's not the right police, it's the government.
Okay.
Has the government breached the Bill of Rights? Because the government, let's look at C. Let's look at C, to provide basic nutrition, shelter, and basic health care services and social services.
But my focus want to be in relation to the protection of children as far from the legal standpoint, because I think there's one that to place at risk the child's well-being, education, physical or mental health, or spiritual, moral, or social development. I think that one comes pretty close. The children were placed at risk by the lack of proper prosecution or timely prosecution, or in some cases, no prosecution at all. And what we don't know was what assistance was given to those children during the whole process of investigations and stuff like that, where they referred to the proper child agency to seek the help that they needed. Like I said earlier, not help after the case has been disposed of, but the help that is needed irrespective of the outcome of the case.
Yes, you were right. That they would be in breach of Section 17 of the Constitution, but you could not blame the police. You would have to blame the whole government, because it says here, in addition to the provisions of this part, which afford protection to children, the legislature shall enact laws to provide every child and young children. So it's the legislature is the government's responsibility, is the elected people's responsibility to do all these things. And to pass down this responsibility, this delegated responsibility to the police.
Are you seeing the particular section, Ms. Teresa, as well?
Yeah,
I want you to read.
No, I was looking for cases.
Okay.
Because of course, and this is not something that we tend to do routinely. The families obviously could bring a case as in the civil courts and to get some type of restitution, which is why I said we haven't seen the report. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes to determine if there's been any kind of arrangements to actually alleviate, some of the wrongdoing. So I was actually looking for cases, local cases, to see whether or not that has been done before. That's what I was searching for. But generally speaking, there has been a colossal breach of the Constitution on these levels for years and years and years. And I've heard Mr. Macfield raise this on the show from time immemorial with respect to Section 55 of the Constitution and the role of the Premier, the Governor, and the responsibilities that fall with that. But we as a people, we don't say anything. And all we can do is speak to the issues, raise it, and hope for discussion, and hoping that someone will have the kind of courage to stand up and do the right thing. And as Johan said, don't wait until parents start to get vigilante and start to behave in a way that's not really helpful for the way the community, for a community. But I'm just going to see if I can find a civil case that have been brought with this. Yeah.
Well, what I'm going to read in the meantime, just before we go to the commercial break, that part 2 of Section 17 of our Bill of Rights says here, in implementing subsection 1, and subsection 1 talks about the legislature bringing into place laws to protect children, the legislature shall proceed on the basis, and listen to this, folks, this is important, the legislature shall proceed on the basis that a child's best interests are of paramount importance in every matter concerning that child, not selective matters, in every matter concerning that child, the child's best interest is paramount. Folks, these are not just words that we decided to put on paper to make a constitution look and sound good. It has to be more than that. We have to have the willingness to enforce it. Now, if the legislature has passed the laws for that to be done, then the people who are charged with enforcing it need to get on with the job. And if you don't have the right people in place to do the job, then get the right people and put them in place, because our children are protected by our Constitution, by our Bill of Rights. With that, we'll take a quick commercial break. If you need to press the pause button, please do so, but don't change the dial. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We have one caller going straight to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I really appreciate this conversation taking place this morning.
Thank you.
Also, you said that our children are protected by the Constitution.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think they are promised to be protected by the Constitution. The people who are supposed to protect them or fulfill that promise are the officers, the government. And it's obviously not happening. Now, I've had this discussion with people on many occasions before, but on a different subject.
Okay.
They talk about the Constitution protecting your right to life. Yeah, you have a promise of protecting your life. But you have to have a means by which you can protect your life. And what's missing here is the proper means by which our young people will be protected from this type of abuse. And so I'm just trying to couch it in a way that doesn't give people a false impression. The words on a piece of paper is a promise. Okay? I like that the Commissioner of Police, said that he takes responsibility for it. It brings it into sharp focus, and hopefully whatever the issues are that need to be addressed can be addressed. But it's wonderful listening to you guys this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Dr. McFeel. I know you had a point earlier
Yes,
off air.
the point that you made, in section 17(2), it says, in implementing section 1, the legislature shall proceed on the basis of the child's best interests are of paramount importance in every matter concerning the child. Now that is true. I see that it's true in the courts, in the divorce courts, in the civil and matrimonial registry. You will never, if a child is involved, if children are involved, you will never get the divorce unless the child's interests are taken care of under the children's law. That has to be, and the courts guard and protect that right to protect the child interests, and it is most paramount in the
Divorce cases.
In the divorce cases. And if that can happen in divorce cases, why can it happen otherwise?
And obviously, the justice who dealt with that particular case, that is
Justice Owen.
Justice
Yes.
Owen, recognized that, and that is why he admonished
Yes.
the police, for.
But here's another thought as you were speaking. I've had reason to review the public service management law recently, and I'm aware of certain of its provisions. We have not really seen the prosecutions, and I'm sure they must have some level of frustration when they try to prosecute the matters and they are not successful because of inadequate detective work. So I am sure there's a story to be told by them as well. But I know under the public service management law, members of government aren't really allowed to speak to certain issues with a measure of candor. So it would be useful to find out what their findings have been, in terms of having these matters prosecuted.
Can I switch gears a little
Sure.
bit and basically staying on the same matter, but this one has to do more with an elderly person, and it seems as if the crime wasn't committed here in the Cayman Islands, but someplace in Hawaii, and the person was located here, and they're going through extradition proceedings now. I was a little bit concerned that in applying for bail, the lawyer for that individual pointed out that the person had some medical issues and everything, and the judge basically asked for evidence to support that claim. But there is also the reported claim that the person has used several aliases in the past, and without knowing how many passports that person may have in various names, bail has apparently been granted to that person. And if we look at previous instances, we have seen, because of a person's ingenuity and their ability to assume various identities and to be able to take advantage of some of the cracks in our system, have been able to leave the jurisdiction. And my question when I read that article was, if a person has multiple identities and possibly multiple travel documents, why would you give that person bail?
Well, it seems to me one system for one and one system for the other.
How good a lawyer that you have to argue your case, huh?
How good your advocate is, That's it seems to me. Bail's a discretion. I mean, bail's a right. It's a right now under the bail law. It's you have a right to bail. There are 3 or 4 reasons why the court will not grant bail. Number one, if cogent evidence is given to a judge or a magistrate that you will interfere with witnesses while you're on bail. Number two, if the cogent evidence is given to the judge or magistrate that you will not turn up for your trial. And number three, if cogent evidence is given that you will commit further offenses while on bail. So it concerns the kind of offense in which you were committed. So if the police didn't have any evidence cogent evidence before the magistrate that this person was not going to defect and breach their bail terms, the magistrate granted bail on onerous terms. I know there's a reporting requirement I saw in the bail in the bail conditions. They're reporting retirement, and there's a sort of a.
But if you're not here to report, then
yes,
and that's the whole.
Yes.
And isn't the fact that the person has used multiple identities in the past a cogent evidence? Of course, that may be one part of it, and the other evidence may outweigh that particular. But the flight of risk, and it would appear as if that one of the factors that the judge took into account was the illness of the person, but at the same time questioned it and said, all of a sudden this illness is here. Can you provide documentary evidence that this person has been under the care of a doctor prior to this happening? We have a call, Ms. Susan. One caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
You just caught us, just barely.
I know you're about to close up the show. Earlier on, you're talking about the tempura thing and an investigation into the police or auditors. But I thought that's why Mr. Bridger came here, because he started an investigation and he did get through it, part of it, very quickly. But then it seems as if he was hampered by the very person who ordered the investigation, and the 300-page document or whatever it is has never been released. We don't know why. You said what it was all about. There is and it has never been released to us, the public, but there is a case in Australia where in 1975, I think it was, I remember reading it some time ago, where the Prime Minister was actually the Governor General there, that's an independent council dominion, and was actually trying to dismiss the Prime Minister's government. I think the Prime Minister's name was McNonaghy or something like that. And there was correspondence between Her Majesty and that Governor General that was very important to the government there to know. And it hasn't been released to this day. They've been trying to get it released. There is some journalists now trying to get it released. I think what I heard was the July thing of this year. And we know the Governor General there is appointed by the Prime Minister and then approved by Her Majesty to do with him. But it's a ceremonial thing, these Governor Generals and those. But that because the present Prime Minister, I think his name is Turnbull, isn't it?
Malcolm Turnbull.
Yes, he said that the Governor General is just an unelected ribbon cutter. That's what he thinks. So he said that the information should be released. I don't know if you ever heard anything about it, but it's an interesting situation here. I guess with us, the tempura thing will never be released, and we never know.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. I'm going to impose on both of you this morning and dispense of closing comments, because I have 4 emails that persons sent in. One starting at 8:30 this morning, and because I was looking at my WhatsApp and not getting into the other issues, I didn't read these, so I want to read them now. One listener says biometrics and eyeball scans are needed to secure and enhance our borders, just like you have at the airports in the United States. Whenever government gets the $500,000 fingerprint system dusted and out of storage, this new biometric program should begin with documenting non-Caymanians living and working in the country. The other person says, please feel to share this email with Dr. Steve and Ms. Teresa and read the relevant parts of it. It says, I'm a Caymanian who filed a attached human rights complaint on being one of the hundreds of Caymanians wrongfully refused permission to vote in the 2017 general elections when the elections office unconstitutionally removed our names off the electoral record because we were living abroad for over 2 years in the previous year. Human Rights Commission found that there was cause So I would like to present this matter to the Chief Justice. If the Chief Justice finds that the Elections Office violated her human rights to vote, who otherwise were eligible to vote, would that trigger a new election like in Kenya? And then we have another one that says, to answer Ms. Teresa's question as to whether there are other agencies working with the police, please look at MASH, M-A-S-H, Cayman. This is an agency that works directly with the FSU, and we still get these results. Ms. Teresa says, right money, and I fear two big issues. Also, too many wrong people too many wrong people in the right places. And then the final one says, each of you brings hope to listeners like me. Thank you for the honesty and the substance of the discussions. On the matter of our security and the quality of our policing, clearly it is not a concern to the Premier. There are certain powers provided to him under the Constitution to make this a priority for the government. He therefore should not be permitted to hide behind the fact that police generally falls to H.E. the governor. National security was not a priority in his last term either, evidenced by the facts and the fact that they rarely met. The Premier, the AG, and many others live in gated communities or are otherwise afforded protection. The wider community, especially those on the lower end of the economic spectrum, do not have. Perhaps this is why security is not a priority. They need a good dose of what it feels like to be vulnerable to bring them out of their current reality. One thing is for sure, Jamaica was once a thriving, civilized country too, and we need not think we are not on that same trajectory if we do not demand more from the government in terms of our national security. We have illegal guns and crime all on the increase without any reaction by the government. Immigration has been leaderless for years. To whom does that responsibility fall? The Premier. What has he done now into his second term? Nothing. I am not going to blame the governor for the escalating lawlessness, which is now becoming the unfortunate new culture in the Cayman Islands. Why should she care if our elected government could care less? All I can say is shame, shame on the Premier for the abrogation of his most important function, our national security. It is his legacy and history that will judge him best. Caller has some good points. I'm not sure that we should pin everything in terms of national security on the Premier, because the governor, again, is in charge of national security as well. But again, Dr. Macfield, using your point, if you find that you're not effective in the role that you're playing in that, then ask for control of it.
Exactly.
So that, if you're going to at least get the blame, then you carry the responsibility and with it.
And it's right there written. It's written in black and white, and it says that the governor can do that if you ask her.
Okay. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to thank my two co-hosts with me this morning, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. John Sterling, Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for talk today. Have a great day. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.